Welcome to this sewing tutorial where we'll make another plush toy, Simon the Sprunky. Simon is a character full of charm, and today we'll be sewing both Phase 1 and Phase 5 versions of him. Yes, I have no idea what it means, but my son said that this is what he needs, so we will make a happy Simon and his spooky version on the back. Before we get started, let's talk about the materials you'll need to sew Simon the Sprunky. For the fabric, I recommend using polyester fleece or cotton fabric. Both are soft, durable, and easy to work with. In this video, I will be using just a yellow cotton fabric. If your fabric is slightly elastic and might stretch out, here's the example of fusible fabric that you iron on the back. I'm using fleece in black, white, and red to create Simon's face. I was using also a pair of regular scissors and zigzag scissors for trimming the fabric edges. To mark the pattern on the fabric, a regular marker or a water-soluble fabric. Marker will work perfectly. I also considered adding wire to his antennas for extra structure, but in the end, it turned out I didn't need it. I started by drafting Simon's form and printing out the pattern. I'd love to share this pattern with you, but unfortunately, it might be copyrighted, and I don't want to end up in jail. I have more toys to do and the laundry is waiting, so this design is roughly a 16-inch version of Simon the Sprunky. Now, I'll move on to assembling the pattern and cutting out all the shapes we'll need. Now, I'm cutting out the shapes for the eyeballs, pupils, and eyelids. Here, I've drafted the back, the spooky version of Simon's face. I'm not entirely sure what's going on here, but according to my 7-year-old expert, it's perfectly fine to have suddenly 3 eyeballs inside the mouth. So, let's roll with it. I'm drawing the eyeballs onto white felt. I don't have any fancy cutting tools, so we're keeping it old school with a marker and scissors. Drawing on black felt can be tricky, so instead, I'm pinning the shape onto the felt and doing my best to cut out a circle. I've cut out the pattern shape, but I left off the antennas for now since I'll be stuffing and attaching them later. However, I did mark the positions where they'll need to be attached. Now, I'm tracing the pattern shape onto the fabric's left side using a water-removable marker. As you can see, I've also marked the positions where the antennas will need to be attached later. I marked the space at the bottom for the opening, so I can turn the fabric right side out later. Here, you can see me marking the positions for the eyes directly on the fabric's right side using a removable marker. I can see the pattern clearly under the light. But if you're working with thicker or furry fabrics, you might want to use pins instead. I'll also mark the other face details, like the eyebrows and lips, to ensure everything is properly aligned and easy to trace it with the sewing machine. I am cutting Simon's eyelids. Now, I'll start working on Simon's eyes. First, I'll attach the black parts using black thread. I'm using a simple straight stitch and keeping it as close to the edge as possible. I'm taking my time with this step. Even though the video looks slow, it's actually sped up about 4 times. That's how slow I go to get it just right, because I know that redoing will make it even slower. Next, I'll attach the eyelids. I want them to look like they were drawn with a black marker, so I'll create that effect using thick thread. To do this, I'm using a tight zigzag stitch and going over it 2 or 3 times for extra definition. I'm not sure if my machine can do this better. There's probably a magical stitch setting that could get it done in one go. Note to my future self: next time, read the sewing machine manual before considering it useless. Now, I'm going to attach the eyes to the face. I'll sew around them using the same zigzag technique as before. Once that's done, I'll also draw and stitch the brows and lips to complete the facial details. Now comes the part where I can just sew and relax. It's like my little escape. For a moment, that pile of laundry doesn't exist anymore. We could stick with just one happy, smiley Simon face, but my son insists on adding the spooky version on the back, so let's do it. I'll cut these shapes out of felt. They don't need to be perfect. More or less works just fine for this part. Now it's time to work on the eyes. While placing the pupils on the red eyeballs, I realized they don't have to be perfectly centered. Placing them off center will give the eyes a more bizarre look. Also, I'm just going to position them randomly between those teeth. And as you guessed, black thread inside the black and red thread on the red. If you're using felt, there's no need to stuff the antennas. Simply sew 2 or 3 layers of felt in the antenna shape, and you're good to go. I originally thought stuffing such a tiny part would be a good idea. But trust me, it was a lot of work. Turning them right side out and trying to stuff through that narrow tunnel was more trouble than it's worth. Save yourself the hassle and skip the stuffing. Now, I'm drawing the face shape on the left side of the fabric. Just a quick tip. Make sure to mirror it since the hair only goes to one side. This line will guide me when connecting the front and back pieces. I use a light source to check. If the pieces are aligned properly, but if you're working with thicker fabric, placing pins at key points works just as well. Before sewing everything together, you'll need to place the antennas. How you position them depends on the look you want. I decided to angle mine slightly to the sides instead of straight up, even though Simon's antennas are typically more upright. This decision, however, resulted in a formal complaint from my resident Sprunki expert. I had to use my long stare-down look to resolve the issue, and the complaint was eventually revoked. Here you can see both layers placed together with the right sides facing each other and the antennas tucked inside, ready to be sewn. It's important to use a short stitch length and sew slowly, especially around the rounded edges to keep the shape clean. Don't forget to leave an opening at the bottom so you can turn the fabric right side out later. You might notice that my Simon's body is a bit wider than the original design in the videos. That's intentional. I wanted this toy to stand steadily on a shelf, so I made the base a little wider for stability. Then I am using a piece of cotton soaked in water to remove the marker. Now it's time to stuff Simon! I'll start with the smaller parts, like the hair and ears, and then move on to stuffing the rest of the body. And a little controversial tip, once you've added some stuffing, give Simon a few punches to help distribute it evenly and add more stuffing. It might not be the most kid-friendly step to show, so I'll skip that part in the video, but this is how you get a plush toy nicely stuffed. Once that's done, I'll sew the opening closed. And that's it! Our Simon the Sprunky plush toy is complete! Whether you would make the happy Simon, the spooky Simon, or a combination of both, I hope you had fun watching creating him. Thank you so much for joining me on this sewing adventure! If you enjoyed this tutorial, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. I'd love to see your version of Simon or other Sprunky, so feel free to share your creations. Until next time, happy sewing, and I'll see you in the next.